So, a lot of people on this planet take their lives very seriously, and they're very worried about messing up their life some way or another, or getting everything right, or not missing out on every opportunity because they're like, this is the only life I get. And I just want to tell you about some experiences I've had that have changed that viewpoint for me. So, first of all, I've come to see this life as this big experiment. I think some people get depressed because they're like, my life's not turning out the way that I'm supposed to have it. Maybe you don't like your marriage, or you don't like the way your kids turned out, or you didn't have the kind of kid you wanted, or whatever, right? Things didn't go the way you hoped. But after you're dead, or after your life is over, and even you could do this before you die if you know what you're doing. I have. You can go back and be like, what would have happened if I'd made this one choice differently? Right here. What would happen if I made this one choice differently? And you can go and see what would have happened. Create this whole other timeline, this whole other version of you. I've created multiple timelines of myself, and found out what would happen if something turned out differently. If I just thought of myself differently, or chose something different at a certain time. And so I think realizing that's a possibility in a way kind of helps you to take life less seriously. I used to think that this life was this test that you're trying to prove that you're good enough by the end of it. And there's this big judgment, and you find out if you're good enough to have a good existence after this life, you get to live in this place or that place or whatever. And I think that belief system was defeating in a lot of ways, because people would try to coerce each other into living a certain way, being a certain way, and then they'd show up as not being loving. When you have less love to give and less love to show, then you end up short of the mark anyways, because now you are doing conditional love, and you're like, oh, I can only handle the things, I can only love you if you do things exactly the way I say or I think that you should do them, instead of giving people their freedom and choosing to love them anyways, with loving the choices that they, just loving them no matter what choices they make, even if you don't understand them. The other way it's really non-productive to take life so seriously is you can really spend a lot of time feeling like a disappointment, and then living your whole life out of shame and fear, and in the shadow of your perceptions of what other people think of you or might think of you, instead of really owning your worth and knowing you can choose what you want in any moment, and being just happy and gleeful about seeing how your choices turn out. I've definitely lived out some of those things really strongly in my life, and it's not a happy place to be in. So it's another way that belief is unproductive. So as the world ascends higher and the vibration of the planet keeps moving upward, which is going to keep doing for the next several years, people get higher perspectives. And as more and more people get this higher perspective, and they kind of ascend higher and higher, they realize things. They get to a new state of mind where they realize things, and they're one of them is realizing that whole belief system that I used to have when I was younger or years ago, it doesn't work anymore. It doesn't hold truth. It doesn't hold light. It's not useful. And even from that state, I would say someone could go back and be giving your past self advice and be like, yo, by the way, thinking this way is not effective, and here's why. And then suddenly clarity comes, and you just see things higher. But as more people adopt or go into an ascended higher awareness, you just why did I ever think that? And it's kind of funny, because sometimes I think where you're at presently, you can look back to the past and be like, why would anyone ever think this or think that? but people just did, and you like people would dismiss, like, that's what people's real experiences were back in that day, like people used to get dusted with DDT thinking it was a good thing or whatever, right? Just all sorts of crazy experiences we could go over. Like, people used to think this, people used to think that. And that's how it will be one day. You'll have this, people will go up and they'll have this higher perspective that they'll be like, why did I think that was true? Why